Welcome to Solutions Rising. I'm Rachel Branch, and I am delighted to welcome Pat Elder to Solutions Rising. Mr. Elder has been spearheading uncovering carcinogenic per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS, on our military bases around the world and the effects on our lives and our environment. Welcome, Mr. Elder. Pat, if I may. We usually start off by saying, would you please tell our audience whatever you would like about your background, your life, and your heritage, whatever you would like.
My heritage.
No, you don't have. This is anything you want.
My great-great-grandparents owned slaves in Maryland.
My Gallup ancestors also had slaves.
I don't claim that.
No.
But I grew up in Washington, D.C., and I attended Catholic schools in the heart of the city. And early on, one of the priests said, "Hey, your government is burning babies in Vietnam. What are you going to do about it?" I was 15, and those were the days with the Cambodian demonstrations, and I got into the anti-war movement at an early age, and I helped to organize some of the anti-war demonstrations, in the 90s, and then again in after Afghanistan and Iraq, and kind of, moved on pragmatically. We did manage to get a couple 100,000 people on the street, but it didn't seem to do a whole lot of good. Mm-hmm. And I got into countering recruitment, and that was a cottage industry for me for a while. But I transferred over to this military poisoning idea about 7 years ago, and I've been on that since. And I think, I heard Pat Hines, who's actually from Western Mass. She was speaking at a conference, I think it was in Minnesota, and she said that we need to be mindful of burn pits, and she mentioned PFAS, and I had never heard of it. And she said this stuff is a killer. It never goes away.
Pat has been a guest on Solutions Rising, Pat. She has also been a guest on Solutions Rising.
Oh, she has? Yeah, well, she's a darling soul.
Terrific.
And I have grown to respect her deeply, mm-hmm. And she's the one who first opened my eyes. And I don't know, I read a story by Tara Kopp in Military Times. It's actually a Gannett publication, and she had written, the article's title was "Why Women Were Told Don't Get Pregnant at George Air Base," and that opened my eyes a little bit more. And so I've written about 400 articles since then. Initially on contamination up and down the East Coast, and then more so in California, Hawaii, and now, Germany and Japan especially. So I've been around, and my shtick has been to simply, measure, take samples of water flowing from military bases, U.S. military bases, and measure them for a host of PFAS chemicals. PFAS, again, is per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS, and they're killers, and I can talk more about that.
What are they? What are
they?
Yeah, is there a way that everyday people can understand what they are?
Yeah. Back in 1938, they were discovered in a DuPont lab in New Jersey by accident. And basically, they combined fluorine and carbon atoms, and they came together. And they realized when you merge the two atoms together, you make a really powerful molecule that in all of chemistry is the toughest, strongest bond. So it can put out a fire better than anything. It can repel water better than anything. And it can repel grease or clean engine parts better than anything. And so it was among the most revolutionary discoveries in all human history. And I should add, that 1938, heck, just 6 months later, German physicists split the atom. And, so we have two existential threats to humanity, both being unleashed on the world in 1938. And PFAS was an integral part of the development of the atomic bomb because they needed something to put out fires in a hurry if things got out of hand. And that's the miracle of PFAS. It is the best ingredient you can use in a foam to put out fires, that are super hot. So chemical fires or petroleum fires, that has been the go-to. But since then, scientists, especially in Europe, where there is a reason for more so doing so. They've developed what we call 3F foams, which are fluorine-free foams, which can put out a fire, maybe 1.2 seconds, 1.5 seconds longer than it takes for PFAS to put the fire out. So most of Europe has switched, and America is slowly waking up, and we are in the process now of switching all military installations and all commercial hangars into these non-threatening types of foams. Something we should have done 20 years ago.
So non-military, like airplanes, airports, other firefighting companies, do they use PFAS? Do they use that foam?
Well, it depends the state that you're in. I think Massachusetts has done a pretty darn good job compared to most of the other states. And one of your listeners may want to bear me out because I'm not an expert on much of anything. Particularly not what is the status of AFFF, that's aqueous film forming foam in Massachusetts, but I think there has been some collection, and I think for the most part it has been eradicated from your municipal airports. And the military, for its part, says that by October of 24, which always seems so far away, it's actually next month, right? They say they're going to have it off of their bases, and really, I think the intention is to only have it in use at a few bases. They say they haven't delineated them for emergency purposes and for use on ships. And the idea of the use on ships is problematic because the stuff, winds up in the ocean, and it's known to bioaccumulate wildly in fish.
Wow. So it's used around the world, and I always like to come back to like everyday people. How is it in our lives? I mean, obviously, there must be some explanation for the amount of cancer in our country. And of course, you're from Maryland, where my closest friend lives, and she's had multiple cancers. The effects on people. Where do we find it? What do we look for?
Well, it's extremely difficult because it's a kind of hidden chemistry. But I think we need to look at studies done by the Europeans, in this case, the European Food Safety Authority, that's EFSA. And my goodness, it's been 7 or 8 years now, where they figured that about 86% of the PFAS in our blood is from the food we consume. And Americans still are under the impression that this is mostly a contaminant that is waterborne, and that you find it mostly in your drinking water. And of course, you do find PFAS in your drinking water, but in many areas, you'll probably find it more so in the food and in the air you breathe, and particularly in the dust in your homes. And then the water might be third. For the most part, municipalities have cleaned up, the PFAS in the drinking water. So when we look around Massachusetts now, it was startling a few years ago when you all published your drinking water results. But we have the technology, and the technology involves what we call granular activated carbon, which is GAC for short. So just imagine, I don't know, maybe the cubic footage of the room you're in right now, and you fill that with little bits of granulated carbon, and you filter water through that several times, and you can take most of the PFAS out, the vast majority of it out of the drinking water. So it's not so much a problem. What the problem um, is with seafood and the fish. And I'll just tell a quick story just to doggone it and make sure I drive this point home because this is my essence. So, I'm in Maryland, and we have a small state with a lot of military on the Potomac River and the Chesapeake Bay watershed. Okay, we look at Maryland, and it's a waterous place. Okay, and so lots and lots of bases. Joint Base Andrews, Patuxent River Naval Air Test Center, the Naval Academy in Annapolis, the Naval Research Laboratories, Chesapeake Bay Detachment, all in a relatively small area. So, so we organized people, and we really pushed the Maryland Department of the Environment to test water. And we have tested water at these facilities and a dozen others in the state and found high levels of PFAS draining from these military bases into the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And one instance involved Joint Base Andrews, which is 8 miles south of Washington on Piscataway Creek, and it drains into the Potomac River directly across from George Washington's Mount Vernon. It's really an amazing place. Anyway, we tested the water and, walked through the woods with lots of poison ivy and sticker bushes. Man, and walked about a mile and a half to this horrendous place where, there's a giant 12-foot high fence with barbed wire, and then this brown water coming out of the base, this headwaters of Piscataway Creek. And a lot of times what they'll do with these runways is they put them on relatively high ground where the water drains from the runways. In this case, the fire training area was very close to Piscataway Creek. But anyway, so I took a sample and found 3,000 parts per trillion of PFAS in the water of Piscataway Creek where it leaves the base. Most of that was PFOS. Okay. So, we wrote several articles and wrote lots of letters and organized people who wrote lots of letters and said, hey, state of Maryland, if what we have found is true, it means that the fish in Piscataway Creek and the Potomac River are likely to be deadly, poisonous. Women who are pregnant or may become pregnant shouldn't be eating this fish. This is a crisis. And boy, they tested the water right after we did, like within a year. And they found 3,100 parts per trillion. So it was a real vindication for us because they'd been challenging the cyclopure test kits that we'd been using, saying, "Oh well, this is not a scientific method," but it proved that, the kits we were using were correct. And we've had several tests in recently too. Like in Maine, we tested cyclopure against 4 other companies, and man, they're right along each other. So then we go to the state to test the fish. And they did. And they found a little sunfish, a little sunfish really close to the base with nearly 500,000 parts per trillion of PFOS. You don't eat those sunfish. But the largemouth bass eat the sunfish. And largemouth bass, just 8 miles downstream, were caught and tested by the state of Maryland and found to have 94,200 parts per trillion. They're in the Potomac River, and every day, this time of year, hundreds of tourists are put on charter boats, and they go down toward Mount Vernon, and they fish and they catch largemouth bass. They take them home and they eat them. That's 94,200 parts per trillion in the fish. That's not regulated, just south of Washington, D.C. Meanwhile, the Biden administration, to its partial credit, is now regulating PFOS along with 5 other types of PFAS. Sorry, PFAS is the umbrella. That's per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. There are 15,000 of them. PFOS is one of them. Anyway, the Biden administration is trying to keep PFOS in our drinking water at 4 parts per trillion. So I tested the water in an apartment complex within a mile of where that fish was caught. And the water is provided by the Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission. And we tested for 55 analytes or 55 compounds. And we found 1.2 parts per trillion of PFAS in the drinking water, which is heavily regulated. It's not the drinking water for municipalities. The drinking water is highly contaminated where people have wells, where you have military bases belching this stuff out. So don't get me wrong. But the point is, you got 94,200 parts per trillion of PFOS in the fillet of a largemouth bass. And I mean, these fish can be 2 to 3 feet long. It'll feed a family for days and days. And people eat the stuff. And we know what it does. It cuts through the placenta. All babies born are infected with these chemicals. It gets into their blood and in their brains. It goes through breast milk. We have found breast milk in women in the hundreds and hundreds of parts per trillion, way more dangerous than what the EPA says we shouldn't be drinking in the water. So again, getting back to the Europeans, they're saying most of this stuff is from food, and America hasn't woken up to that. Michigan, listen to this data. Michigan tested 2,600 fish 3 years ago and found the average fish with 80,000 parts per trillion of PFOS, and still throughout that state, in most areas, the fish are not regulated. We had one fish we found, or the Michigan, state of Michigan, that contained 10 million parts per trillion of PFOS in its fillet close to Wurtsmith Air Base. So if you find where the fire training pits are, or you find where the wastewater from a base empties into surface water, that is the greatest threat I see to public health posed by PFAS. It's not what people think, okay? The wastewater treatment plants are a huge problem, and it's not just from military. The military tends to be the worst. You can add a couple zeros when you're dealing with military, contamination with PFAS. But normal use by residents, flushing things down the toilet, washing the laundry, materials that are, coated with stain and waterproofing heads into the sink and down the drain, and certain detergents and different hair products and just products that we use all the time go down the drain. And so what happens, it goes to the municipal wastewater treatment plant. And you can always spot them on Google Maps. They look like perfectly round pools. And at the end of the wastewater treatment plant, they treat for heavy metals, cadmium and mercury and things of that nature, but they don't treat for PFAS. And so what happens is you are left with solid waste, and you're left with what we call liquid effluent. and the liquid effluent full of PFAS goes into the river. And the solid waste typically is either spread on agricultural fields or it is incinerated. Well, this is firefighting foam. It doesn't incinerate. And so you find 10, 20, 30 miles downstream, I mean downwind, uh, the stuff is just sprinkles of silent death over farms and fields, and the entire process repeats itself. It just doesn't go away. That's the thing that people can't get their heads around. It doesn't go away. We don't know what to do with it. And it's so un-American. When you get down to it, we are a proud, bullheaded people. We've created a science we cannot restrain. We can't get rid of this stuff. We can't burn it and we can't bury it.
So this is a vicious circle that just
Yeah,
going to the water,
yeah.
through the fish, through the food. There must be, I mean, obviously now all of us have some of this in our system. What can everyday people, I mean, does it matter if you have water filters in your house? Does it matter?
Yeah.
How, is there anything that we could do? I mean, I know we get water reports from our municipalities. Are there PFASs or PFOSs on those? I mean, I wouldn't have known what that was. I am not scientifically oriented, as everybody knows, but I understand. But this is like almost an unsolvable problem.
Well, I appreciate, Rachel, that you keep circling back to what about, regular folks at home,
Yeah.
I mean, we have to break this down so that people can learn to protect themselves because obviously governmental entities have failed us miserably. So it's incredibly important. I, would suggest that people order a PFAS test kit, if they're so inclined. There's a company called Cyclopure. I don't make money from Cyclopure. I have spent a lot of money on Cyclopure, begging my, funders to help me pay for these $79 test kits, and I think I've ordered about 400 of them. Um, for $79, you can take a cup that's 5 ounces, and it's got a little filter on the bottom of it, and you pour the water into the cup, and you let it drain out, and you mail the dry cup with its little filter at the bottom back to Chicago, where Cyclopure is located, and you get your results in a week. And so that'll tell you one thing. I think there are, oh my goodness, a host of competitive and pretty high functioning filter systems for homes that you can hook up. And we have tested them, to see the efficacy of various testing kits. And most of them seem to do a pretty good job. So, you can go to the Environmental Working Group's website, and they have, like Consumer Reports kind of rated them. I wouldn't get too carried away with things like Teflon pans. It's, maybe, cut steak and you scrape the pan and, you get a little bit of Teflon, on your knife and you spread your knife you butter your toast. Maybe. But I'm telling you, if you eat an ounce of fish that contains 10 million parts per trillion, there's just we're talking about many uh, zeros added on in terms of parts per trillion, just orders of magnitude higher. It's the food that we're eating. We have eggs in Maine with 33,000 parts per trillion. We have milk in Maine with similar amounts. We have verified chicken and beef, and we've had to, euthanize cows across the country because they're dangerous to eat. It's dangerous to drink their milk because of PFAS. And that's just in a few states where, they've taken the time to test for these chemicals. So that would be it. I think it helps to begin to advocate for regulations that will identify, PFAS in all of your consumer products. Try not to bring them into your home in the first place. And I think Massachusetts has done a pretty good job as far as that's concerned. I know several states have. Oh, you can go to Safer States. Man, what a great website. Safer States, and just put, Safer States PFAS, and it'll give you, I think there's 18 states now that have regulations, on PFAS. Some of them, man, you can't, this dental floss, you got to be careful and you have to label it. And other states don't seem to care much about it. And all of this is happening on a state by state level because the EPA
Yep.
has seriously dropped the ball.
Which doesn't
Aside
surprise me
from
at all.
regulating it in one environmental media, drinking water, aside from that, they're not on the case. The foam can gather on the rivers. The fish can be contaminated. The eggs and the beef can be contaminated. The air can be contaminated. Oh my God, the dust in people's homes can be contaminated.
Pat,
And so,
we are right near the end, and I would
wow,
like to know if you would come back for a part two. And
yeah, I'll come
obviously,
back. I
you've
mean, I'm
given
sorry, I'm
some
really kind of
solutions.
like
I
getting
would
going
really
here.
like you to do that. And I want to thank you so much for being a guest. I want to send everybody to militarypoisons.org for information from you. It's just stunning, the information and what I've learned. And of course, people can be involved by finding out what the EPA and their state by state, what their regulatory agencies are doing or not doing, and be part of that. I mean, I just say everybody has a gift. You know what your gift is. You know how to use it. But I'm
That's
so
it.
grateful to you, and thank you so very much. Yes,
Appreciate
and
that.
as I say at the end of each program, if each person picks up one problem and solves it, imagine the incredible view we will all have of solutions rising. Please be part of the solution. And I hope you will go to militarypoisons.org. Pat Elder has a wealth of information, and it's understandable. When you get into a lot of numbers, I don't quite understand it, but he's broken it down so you can understand and you can see. Thank you.
Thank you.